Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. I want you to picture the heavy, decisive thud of a closing door. We're not talking about, this soft, accidental click of your bedroom door blowing shut. No, we're talking about a heavy, resonant thud that literally changes the map of a life forever. Our source material actually reveals this as a recurring pattern of divine closure throughout the text, rather than just some act of random cruelty. So, we're going to decode 7 specific times this happens to really understand how this whole motif operates. And this comparison right here beautifully illustrates the core premise of our source text. I mean, let's be honest. Most of us spend our lives absolutely terrified of closed doors, right? We naturally assume they mean rejection or a totally missed opportunity. But if you look closely at the architecture of the Bible, it actually frames these moments as intentional seasons of protection or even a climax. The text argues that God's finality is never just random. It signals that a process has either reached its absolute peak or that a really vital season of protection has just kicked off. To really wrap our heads around this, let's map out the source's 7 shut doors across biblical history. You'll see these aren't just isolated, random incidents. They span from the very beginning of the narrative, way back around 2300 BC, all the way to 90 AD. And we'll see how these doors build chronologically. They move from intense moments of physical safety and survival all the way up to this grand cosmic closure at the very end of the timeline. Recognizing this pattern, it's absolutely key to telling the difference between a simple, temporary delay and a finality that, well, absolutely does not negotiate.
All right, let's jump into Section 1, Doors of Protection.
Starting with the literal survival of the human race, we find this fascinating hidden detail in a story we all know. When we picture Noah and the Ark, we usually imagine Noah standing there at the entrance, heave-hoeing this massive wooden handle shut, just as the first raindrops start to fall. But the text tells a much more haunting story. It says, "And the Lord shut him in." Actually, scratch the whole handle idea. Noah didn't pull it shut, God did. And according to the source, this establishes the massive prototype for this entire concept. The closed door was about sealing the promise in, not just keeping the judgment out. Inside that storm, that shut door was a strict, impenetrable boundary of safety. Now, according to the text, another massive door of protection, the Passover in Egypt, operated under similar rules, but as a threshold marked by the blood of a lamb. This represented a super strict deadline of grace. The absolute crucial instruction here was that the mark of protection had to be applied before the crisis arrived, not during it. Once that procession began, the time for preparation was entirely over. Period. That door of protection was exclusively limited to those who had already positioned themselves safely inside the covenant.
So that brings us to Section 2, Windows of Absolute End. Because while some doors protect and seal promises in, others represent a totally tragic consequence of being unprepared. The source highlights the New Testament parable of the 10 virgins to illustrate this really terrifying shift. In this story, Jesus describes 10 attendants waiting for a groom, but 5 of them just didn't bring the extra oil of a daily, deep relationship. When that midnight shout finally rang out, they scrambled to find oil, but it was way too late. That lack of preparation resulted in 3 of the most devastating words in all of Scripture. The door was shut.
And to really grasp the weight of those 3 words, we kind of have to look at the original language. The Greek word used here is eklese. It's an aorist passive verb, which, trust me, elevates the literary and theological weight immensely. It implies a door closed decisively by someone with absolute authority. The source really emphasizes that this isn't a door that will eventually swing back open, no matter how hard you knock or how loud you plead. It describes a window of opportunity that has reached its absolute, non-negotiable end. Just done.
Moving right along to Section 3, Transformation and Divine Management.
So how exactly do closed doors manage our spiritual growth over time? Well, look at the stark contrast between these 2 profound examples from the text. First up, the wilderness generation. After refusing to trust God, a door was literally shut on them entering Canaan. For 40 years, they were sealed in the wilderness. But as the source notes, this wasn't just some harsh punishment. It was formation. That closed door acted as a sealed womb to raise a totally new generation trained in daily dependence. Now contrast that with Judas Iscariot. He sat at the table, he saw the miracles, but he never surrendered. After his betrayal, he felt remorse, sure, but he experienced a terrifying absolute closure. The source calls this a tragic finality. It's a version of later that simply meant the moment had forever passed, purely because he never let the oil of the Spirit fill him.
And these examples point to the overarching concept of divine management. The source points to passages in Isaiah and Revelation depicting a figure who holds the key of David. You know, the one who opens doors no one can shut and shuts doors no one can open. This represents total sovereignty over the entire narrative arc of our lives. It means that when a door is shut, it's actually an act of divine management. It's determining that a season of silence is actually necessary for our own good, ensuring we don't just confidently walk right through entrances that would ultimately destroy us, simply because we aren't ready for them yet.
And finally, we arrive at Section 4, the ultimate eternal closure. This whole motif culminates in a really beautiful paradox at the very end of the book of Revelation, with the eternal city. The city features 12 gates facing every single direction, north, south, east, and west, and they're designed to invite absolutely everyone from all over. Yet, at the exact same time, the city itself represents the ultimate finality. It is the definitive closed door to the former things. The old world of sin and death, that is shut out forever. So the crucial takeaway from all this rich, ancient imagery is actually deeply personal. The source beautifully describes this as the open mem, which is the flowing water of life, finally settling into the closed mem, representing an internal, perfectly secure home. When we apply this to our own lives, it means that silence is never actually empty. When you're staring at a shut door, it's full of the patient work of building a secure home that you simply cannot yet see. So if you happen to be facing a closed door today, the source leaves us with this really provocative question to reflect on. Remember, a shut door might just be God shutting you in for your own protection, exactly like that prototype with Noah. So the real question isn't whether the door in front of you is open or closed right now. The real question is, do you have the oil of presence in your vessel to ensure you're spiritually prepared and sustained while you wait for the next open door?